Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Media Defence's webinar on International Right to Know Day. I'm going to take a couple of minutes just while everyone's filing in to go over a bit of housekeeping. So we're going to hear from each of the panelists about the cases that they're taking on at the moment. And then at the end, there'll be time for questions, hopefully about 10 minutes or so. So if you just want to pop any questions you have throughout the discussion into this Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, we'll get into those questions at the end. And then also we just want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So no one will show up on the recording other than the panelists, but it means that we'll be able to post the webinar after it's finished for anyone who wasn't able to attend. And then I think that's it, and we can get started.
All right, I think that's the cue for me. Thank you very much, Jeanette. Welcome everyone to the webinar on the right to know. We're very pleased today to have three fantastic lawyers talking to us about their experience in Africa, in Europe, and in the Americas. And we're very excited to hear from them. So before I introduce Mojirayo, Konrad, and Taís, I just wanted to have a very brief introduction on the right to know, or the right to access to information, and how relevant or how important it is for journalists and for the public in general. At Media Defense, we're working on several cases, or supporting several cases that deal with the right of journalists to carry out their work, to collect information, to research, so that they can inform the public and produce the material that the public is waiting from them. And a lot of that is based on the right to access to information, or the right to know, which basically means that government information should be public. There's a presumption that the information from public bodies should be public, and it is in the public interest to have access to this information. And this has developed over the last few decades, or 2 decades mainly, in international courts, in national courts. It's very clear nowadays the sort of obligations that governments have in order to uphold the right to know. So the positive obligations are very clear in the sense that the governments have to implement legislation, to carry out policies, strategies, laws, regulations, so that the information is transparent, is accessible, and anyone can access any information about the working and the functioning of the government. And on the other hand, there are negative obligations on the states, which and they shouldn't restrict, they shouldn't create obstacles for both the public and journalists to access information that is in the public interest. And any restriction should then be judged against the well-known 3-part test that the panelists might make a reference to it later in their presentations. And we believe that this framework on the right to know becomes even more relevant and important nowadays because of the internet, and how authorities and governments communicate with the public using social media, using websites, blogs, and all sorts of quick communication methods that become a matter of public interest, and therefore shouldn't be restricted, blocked, and they shouldn't stop the public, and especially journalists, from accessing this information. And this, I think, comes to the gist of the 3 cases that we're going to hear about in a minute or 2, which refers to authorities in Poland, in Nigeria, and in Brazil, who are restricting the access to their pronouncements, to their posts, effectively, in social media, to journalists and to the public in general. And we believe, as well as the prominent lawyers who are invited to this webinar, that this is wrong, and this violates the human rights of journalists, and therefore they are challenging these 3 situations in court in very different ways. We'll hear from national litigation at a first instance court, before the Supreme Court, and also before a regional court in Africa. And it's very exciting to hear from them on how they're using the law and human rights law to challenge these authoritarian actions by their governments in court. So I'm very happy to introduce our viewers to the three panelists that we have today. Our first panelist is Mojirayo Ogunlana-Nkanga. She's a legal practitioner and principal counsel for MUN Legal. It's a law firm based in Abuja, Nigeria. And she's also the co-founder of the Center for Impact Advocacy, CIA, not to be confused with the other, perhaps more famous CIA. And the CIA is an NGO and public interest-driven organization that was created to promote good governance, defend human rights, and uphold democracy in Nigeria. Mojirayo specializes in human rights and press freedom, both digital and offline media. And she's a member of the Nigerian Bar Association and several other professional associations. In particular, the newly created West Africa Media Lawyers Association. And Mojirayo, I'm happy to say, is a partner of Media Defense in several cases. We've worked together and are working together in several cases. So I'm very happy to have you here. Our second panelist is Conrad Zimasco, and I hope I pronounced it correctly. And Konrad is a lawyer at the Helsinki for Human Rights in Poland, where he coordinates the projects on media freedom. Konrad has been involved in litigation and research projects at Helsinki for Human Rights since 2016. And his work focuses on freedom of expression and the impact of new technologies on human rights. He has a degree in law and sociology from the University of Warsaw. And finally, our last panelist is Taís Gasparian, who's a renowned lawyer and specialist in self-regulation, ethics, and advertising law in Brazil and abroad. Taís has been involved in the creation of several internet law subjects. She's a specialist on intermediary liability on the internet, and her firm's client portfolio includes several prominent Brazilian media outlets. You know, she's the lawyer on the record for the main Brazilian newspapers and media outlets. So it's very exciting to have you here, Taís. And amongst her many achievements, Taís is a member of the Freedom of Expression Committee of the Brazilian Bar Association. She was Chief of Staff of the Minister of Justice in 2002 and a visiting scholar at Yale Law School last year. She also teaches law for journalists and advertising law at the ESPM University in São Paulo. So I think with that introduction, you'll see the high caliber of our panel today. And without further ado, I will invite Mojirayo to start with your presentation. At the end of the session, Jeanette mentioned we'll have a Q&A period, probably 10-15 minutes. So feel free to post your questions and we'll write them down and read them to the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos, for that introduction. I really appreciate it. Thank you for Jeanette. And Jeanette, thank you. And everybody online to make out time for this session. Okay, where do I start? The story of Nigeria and refusal to allow its citizens to participate in governance it has gone past several phases, but let me just start with the present administration. Okay, so in 2015, when the president took over governance, a lot of people were excited about it because everybody was thinking about change and change. Meanwhile, before this change mantra took over the space, in 2011, there was a passage of the Freedom of Information Act, which says that you can, as a citizen of Nigeria, access some information. Now, the information that you can access, maybe in the, there are some exceptions. The Police Act has given some exceptions to the kind of information you cannot access. And so they are all there. But interestingly, till date, it's very hard for you to approach all these government institutions, even when you apply to them. I have a case pending in the national courts on the refusal for the National Petroleum Corporation. So the National Petroleum Corporation refuses to publish up-to-date information about its operation. And that's a different kettle of fish. So, but the one that baffles me most is that when Nigerians and the citizens have found out that the government would always try not to be transparent and accountable, people found a platform which gave them the opportunity to vent and to speak and to, how will I put it, a platform to compare information from other regions with the information in Nigeria. So you can be able to know what you demand, what you really require your government to give you. And that is what Twitter is to a lot of Nigerians, and that is the Nigerian youth. And everyone, you know, a lot of times they believe that every Nigerian youth wants to leave the country, but it's not that. All they want is good governance, and all they want is a government that is accountable and a government that is transparent. But every time you wake up, for instance, I wake up in the morning, I'm a bit skeptical, because I know that the next kind of news I'm going to read or to be aware of will be something that may, you know, will dampen my spirits. But I have to do it because this is the work I do. I have to be up to date with the information. So Twitter was that Twitter is that platform that gives you that up-to-date information. And then it became the platform for journalists, media houses, broadcasting stations. They use Twitter as in, I can't even say the amount of time they use it. It became a livelihood for some set of young people, because some people found it as a means to earn money, and then they became influencers, they became social media handlers, and then they are able to do that. And interestingly, Nigeria has not been able to give its citizens enough, you know, provide employment. And so this Twitter became a place for somebody to get employed, and people have been making money from it. Unfortunately, on June 1st, the president goes on Twitter and tweets about a very sensitive topic for the people of the eastern part of Nigeria. And then it has to do with the deepest part of being a Nigerian. This question has continued to exist since 1967, when we had the Civil War. And then you now allude to an information and say, we will treat them in the same language that we did in 1967 or at the Civil War. When you do that, a lot of people were angry, and then they reported to Twitter and said, Twitter, we don't want this post, bring it down. Now, 3 days later, on June 4th, then the government, through its Minister of Information, goes online on Twitter and said, we are banning Twitter. And then gives a flimsy excuse and says that Twitter existence threatens Twitter's operation threatens the corporate existence of Nigeria. And I'm like, how? How is Twitter's operation, how will I put it, threatening the existence of Nigeria when my own government actually negotiates with bandits? My own government gives amnesty to members of the Boko Haram that has been a problem to my country for years. You are not treating them in the language that they should understand. You negotiate with them, and then you tell me you give them amnesty, and then you don't give closure to the victims of this same sect of people. So those ones are not affecting the corporate existence of Nigeria, but it's Twitter and where Nigerians have been able to get so-called an amount of closure in a way, because it has helped them to air their views. And through Twitter, a lot of cases have been taken up. I came across a case on Twitter about some women who were abused by Nigerian agencies, law enforcement agencies, on April 2019. I became aware of that case over there. And I'm glad to tell you that because of that, I went after that case, and myself and some colleagues went to the court, and we've just gotten judgments from the court based on the fact that that information went on Twitter. Now, my country bans this Twitter, and then I looked at this situation and spoke to some some journalists. And through media defense is a huge support, because they've always been there, very timely at every point in time when I bring up cases. Like a lot of cases are still coming up. We did the Togo case together, and we had the judgment. And so because of that, we brought ourselves together and said, we are going to the regional court, ECOWAS court, because at the time we were even filing, the judicial workers were also on strike. So there were issues around that situation. A country goes ahead to ban Twitter without a law in existence, without, how would I put it, in a democratic society, without right consultation with stakeholders and all. And then you go ahead and do that. So there was no forum in the national space for you to go and file such a case. But interestingly, as ECOWAS court is, even if there had been a forum for us to go to, we could have still chosen to go to ECOWAS court. Why do we choose to go to ECOWAS court? Because we have a level of, these judges are neutral, the judges are not subject to influence. I don't want to go to the history of the subject to influence, please pardon me. And then we have judges who are ready to analyze the situation, analyze the facts just the way it is. And so, when we decided, we went to the court, and at the time we were going to the court, I was still mindful of the fact that the minister also announced that it will start what do you call it? You tax social media platforms. It's called OTT. They will start, that the minister of the, what do you call it, the National Broadcasting Commission should immediately start taxing social media handlers and platforms like that, like Facebook, Twitter, and I think YouTube and co, that they shouldn't operate in Nigeria's space. Now you are doing that. Then a third one is that the Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission then goes out and tells all broadcasting stations they should suspend the use of Twitter. And then, so now then there's a fourth action. And the fourth one is from the Minister of the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of the Federation, who then goes ahead to say, if you are found on Twitter, you will be prosecuted. So there were now these issues, and then we're looking at it, that what really is the foundation for this action from the Nigerian government. And we went to court, and we are still in court. The hearing is to take place tomorrow at the ECOWAS court, that's 29th. And we brought before this court 3 issues, and those 3 issues are enough for us. And it is this: was there a law in place when the Minister of Information announced Twitter ban? 2, does this pursue a legitimate interest? Can the government say that this action of his he has done it based on a legitimate interest? Now, I can say, for instance, that the government will come up with arguments like, oh, Twitter is affecting our corporate existence. We're doing this under national security. And then it begs one question: at whose discretion should the corporate existence be determined? Should it just be solely, should it solely be the prerogative of the executive? Shouldn't there be a way to checkmate this power that can easily be abused by the executive? You know, there's so much to be thought about. And then the fact that, of course, whatever, if you even say it pursues a legitimate interest, is it necessary? And is it proportionate? The action you took, is it proportionate? You are violating the rights of over 20 million Nigerians, which of course I'm being modest with that number. And then you feel that, okay, you have done it and you can do it because you are the government of the day. And this is the tactic the government has chosen to pursue to keep Nigerians from having access to the right information. We already have the problem of not every Nigerian, or most Nigerians are not literate enough. Most Nigerians do not have access to the internet. For instance, I get really worried every single day. My phone network can't even connect to some sites at some point. I know that People's Gazette had complained about the fact that Nigeria had restricted its website from being accessible to Nigerians. And I know for a fact that there are times that you feel as if your network is being messed up with. For instance, even till now, I cannot access Twitter without going through the VPN. Now, VPN is another issue that a lot of people are worried about. It exposes your IP address. There are so many things that just one single action of the government has exposed us to. Now, in a bid also not to allow people to have access to information, there's something ongoing in Nigeria right now that is bothering me, and that's basically is the fact that people from a particular part of the country, the Zamfara state, Sokoto state, Kebbi, some parts of Kebbi, I think Kebbi, and what's the name of the girl? Okay, so these people are being shut out from all telecommunication networks. No telecommunication network is operating in those parts of Nigeria as we speak. So what that means is these people have been shut out from access to information, access to family, access to the internet, access to practically, I can't even imagine, even journalists cannot have access to internet to be able to report violations of rights that will be ongoing. I want to believe that violations of rights are ongoing at the moment. For instance, just some few minutes ago, I've been hearing sporadic gunshots in my country. And I see a news that says that a religious sect is doing a face-to-face with the Nigerian army and the Nigerian police, and then gunshots are going on. Imagine somebody not having access to the right platform. I was able to access that information on Twitter just few minutes ago. And so that has kept me inbound. I can't go out anymore because there's a lot of shooting going on around me. Imagine people living in these places like Zamfara and all this Sokoto place, and they can't even access any information. And then they walk into this kind of danger. So it's a lot of issues. There are a lot of issues going on right now, and I feel really bad about it. And it's worth talking about, especially as today is the day for the right to know and right to access to information. So thank you very much. I hope I was able to explain as much as I could within the time allotted.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mojirayo, and especially for explaining the importance of Twitter in Nigeria and the function that it has, for people to debate, to access information, and for youth to complain and compare what's happening in the country, and now even in matters of security, how relevant and how crucial social media is for society in general and for youngsters in particular. And also thank you very much for running through the idea behind taking the case to the ECOWAS Court of Justice. Why you went to that court and not a different court in Africa, or even before a domestic court in Nigeria. I think that's quite relevant and something that we're always keen to learn from practitioners involved on these real cases going on before courts. So thank you. I'll just straight away pass the floor to Conrad. Please, Conrad, you have the floor. And again, let me clarify that Conrad works for Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights. Foundation was missing from my introduction earlier. I was promptly corrected. So with the record straight, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to say a few words about the case we've been involved in. Norbert Orłowski against Krzysztof Kosiński, a mayor of Ciechanów, a town in northern Poland, in central Poland. I'll say a couple of words about the background of the case, what happened, what are the effects of the ban, how it affects the journalistic work, about our court proceedings, and a few words about our legal arguments, our positions of the parties, and where are we at this stage. So the case is about Norbert Orłowski, who is a citizen journalist running a news portal about Ciechanów, a town in central Poland. The journalist I'm talking about was among many followers of the Facebook page of the mayor of this town. When at a certain point, the mayor banned him and also several other journalists in late 2016. The journalist was not given any reason for the ban, neither during the ban nor when he asked the mayor in person during some event, nor also later when he filed a request for a reason in the brief. What are the effects of the ban? Because I'm not sure how familiar you are with the impacts on the Facebook ban. Initially, the ban meant that the journalist was not able to publish on the mayor's fan page, comment on the posted information, and he did not receive notifications about new posts. Later, however, the mayor applied, in a way, a stronger ban, and now the journalist has no access to any content published on the fan page. He just can't see the mayor's fan page at all when he's logged in. So these are the technical effects of the ban. But of course, these technical effects have strong impacts on the ability to perform journalistic work. The mayor's fan page I'm talking about is an important source of information about his activities and in general about the actions of the town authorities. Some information actually about official events, about town investments, plans of authorities are published more extensively and earlier on the mayor's fan page than actually anywhere else, nor on the municipality website, nor on the municipality social media. So, for example, there has been some announcement that some public buildings will be renovated by the municipality, and the information about it was published earlier on the mayor's fan page and has included more information. There have been more graphics showing how it looked like. And secondly, it also affects his right to impart information and opinions, because the previous part I'm talking about was a clear impact on his right to his gathering, on his right to receive information. But also the ban affects his right to impart information and opinions, as a ban prevents him from, commenting on the published posts, reacting to it in any way, limiting his ability to participate in the ongoing public debate, local public debate on the specific actions taken by the mayor and other authorities that inform about their actions. So this is a very short background of the case. What happened next? The journalist filed a request to the mayor to provide reasons for the ban and to withdraw it, asking to withdraw the ban. It was unsuccessful. We don't really know why the ban was imposed. It seems it wasn't a reaction to any specific comments, rather it was a reaction to a general critical attitude of this journalist and several other journalists, but it will be clearer perhaps later on. So after the request was unsuccessful, the journalists with our help filed a lawsuit suing the mayor. We have supported the journalists providing the pro bono legal representation of excellent lawyers from a law firm we cooperate with, Arthur Sidor and Aneta Novosad from Pierczak Sidor. We have been supported here by the media defense, and also the media defense found in the security brief in the case. In the lawsuit, we claim that the ban violated the journalist Norbert Orłowski's so-called personal rights. This is a broad legal category in Polish civil law that includes many types of legal goods or values, such as good reputation, health, privacy. There's no exhaustive list of this kind of legal values. The basic idea is that you can sue another person when your personal good is violated and request some satisfaction, such as an apology or compensation. In the lawsuit, we claimed the ban violated the following key personal goods: the freedom of expression, a right to information, and right to equal treatment. And we requested in the lawsuit to remove the ban and to publish the apology on the mayor's front page. We have used this general legal venue of civil law because, well, there are no specific regulations on this issue of the social media of public officials or authorities. This is a presidential case in Poland, so we decided to use this kind of legal venue as allows to, well, to sue for violations of this kind of legal goods. The case is still ongoing in the first instance in the regional court. There has been 2 court hearings. The next one will be actually in 2 weeks, and we expect that this might be the last one, and that the court might deliver judgment, well, 2 weeks later. So by late October, we might actually hear the judgment of the first instance. Whatever it will be, we sort of expect that there will be an appeal, because it seems that the mayor is very eager not to accept the claim, and if it will be positive for the journalist, he will appeal, and we are also eager to continue the case as far as it's needed, of course. Now I'd like to briefly recapitulate our legal arguments on the case. So in general, we start with the observation that many public officials nowadays run social media. This fact in itself raises several legal issues. For example, whether they have legal grounds to do this in the context of principal legality, personal data issues, because as they also process personal data through these means. But these are not the questions we are dealing with in this case, although they are important. But we sort of take this social fact as given, and as part of reality that this is what happens, and this is quite a popular phenomenon. And we try to see it as a new channel of communication that should adhere to certain standards that are relevant for any kind of medium and channels of communications. Because such social media, such sites run by public officials, by public authorities, public institutions, have become important channels for quickly sharing information on public matters, as well as venues of lively exchange of information, opinions, and debates between the public officials and individuals, as well as the individuals themselves discussing under the posts, the tweets, whatever social media it is. And this is particularly important for journalists, for whom the quick access to content on public matters is particularly important, as of course news is an approachable commodity, and time matters, especially for journalists. And this has become particularly important also in the COVID pandemic, as we have started the case, sort of working on the case before, but now we see that, we all see that our lives, as we also see here on this webinar, moved online even more. Hence, these kind of new means of communications have become the more important nowadays. Now we think that public officials are not obliged to run publicly acceptable social media. They do not have to choose this kind of venues to communicate with citizens, with constituency. There's no obligation, and there's no corresponding right to communicate with public officials via these means. However, if a public official decides to use this kind of venue to run a social media in its public capacity, then we believe that he or she cannot pick and choose and arbitrarily deprive particular persons of opportunity to communicate with him or her, and to access information and to discuss with others. So a useful analogy is a press conference or any other sort of this kind of public event. There's no obligation to organize press conferences or public officials, but once it is organized, we feel that it would not be acceptable to kick out a particular journalist after he asks a question that a public official feel uncomfortable with, or not to even let in to a public event a particular person because we know that he might be a little bit too critical, and we do not want to hear this kind of voices. I've asked you to wrap up a little bit as we're running out of time. So these are sort of our key arguments. Just two final words. We think that this kind of standard should be followed by public officials. Private persons are in different situations. And just two words about the mayor's position to be fair to him. He thinks that his the fan page is not his official fan page. It's just because there's another fan page of the municipality office. But we think that this argument is, well, it's rather controversial, as the whole content of this fan page is concentrated on his public activities, and there are several other indicators that it is his public, that he runs that in the public capacity. For example, he's also a private profile on Facebook. And secondly, just last words, because I really love this argument. He also argued that fan page is essentially dedicated for fans, as the name suggests. So it is perfectly understandable that critical voices are not welcomed, and anyone who criticize should expect to be banned. So perhaps in 3 or 4 weeks, might have a judgment of first instance. And that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Conrad. It was super interesting, and especially this last argument of the fan page is fantastic. Very creative. Thank you. I think I wanted to highlight from what you mentioned, what you presented, the issue of news gathering and how relevant it is, and how important for journalists to not only follow what the public authority is saying in social media, but also what the population or the followers are commenting. You know, that's an important factor that needs to be bear in mind when reporting. And you explained the technical issue with Facebook and how that, the journalist was blocked from having access to that part of the functionality, and that itself could be a violation. Also, thanks for explaining the specificity of the Polish legislation and how you've decided to frame the issue not as necessarily as a human rights violation as such, but in the context of the civil law in Poland. And so that's quite interesting as well, and shows that one needs to be creative sometimes in how you frame the issue to be taken up by the courts. And I think your presentation, it's the perfect lead up to Taís Gasparian's intervention. I can see quite a few similarities. Now we change from a small town mayor to someone a lot more important and challenging. And I think Taís will be able to tell us what she's doing and what she's litigating in Brazil now. Thank you very much, Taís, the floor.
Yes, thank you, Carlos, Jeanette, and Media Defense for promoting this event. I'm very happy to share with you our experience and also our situation in Brazil, because for us it's becoming very scary, and that's why I think that it's wonderful to share with you all those the cases and also the events that we are having. Well, I think that in a way, Brazil seems to be adrift, not only because the COVID-19, but also and especially because of our president. Bolsonaro, who insists in being violent and keen on attacking all civil liberties, especially freedom of expression. We don't know yet if Mr. Bolsonaro, our president, is an idiot, or if he is someone just authoritarian, autocratic. We don't know yet, but he's exactly. Since the impeachment of our last president, Dilma Rousseff, the country, Brazil, has been divided by polarized political opinions. So we have on the right an anti-democratic mentality that has been gaining strength, and as if it were not enough, we also have a kind of anti-scientific sentiment that has also risen in Brazil. So the president's mentor, so you can have an idea about that, the president's mentor has declared that nothing disproves the conjecture that the earth is flat. So that's how we are dealing with our presidents. It's very hard. And for another example, 3 weeks ago, more or less, Bolsonaro, he attended a demonstration. In fact, he called for this demonstration, and he went there and he attacked to justice from the Supreme Court. He called for military intervention. He defended the violation of the democratic order, and he shouted, "I am the Constitution." So you can imagine how it is. And facing with the pandemic, Bolsonaro also has repeatedly denied the seriousness of the problem, and has even stated that COVID-19 is a simple flu, or that it is a creation of the press. So every time he tries to deny the importance of the press all the time. And although his approval rate remain in 23–24%, the president's popularity has plummeted since his election, and a lot of people who were his supporters are now his opponents. Still, Bolsonaro is his weakening political capital seems to worsen his aggressiveness. So, and this aggressiveness echoes in a country so politically divided. So you can have an idea what Brazil is facing, because today we have about 35 million Brazilians that lack access to running water. So instructions on washing hands or buying hand sanitizers is completely ironic and are nearly useless in Brazil. The situation is in the poor communities, as in the hillside slums and favelas, does not favor social decency. So, and it's very difficult for those who live in one-room houses. A whole family can live in a one-room house. So it's very, very difficult to have social distancing and things like that. And in 2018, long before the coronavirus crisis, the number of Brazilians living under extreme poverty, it means living with less than $1 per day, reached 13 million. So it's not difficult to understand why the president's words against social isolation make more sense for many Brazilians than the recommendations of doctors dressed in white on TV. Brazil is the 6th least equal country in the world. And in such a diverse country with such different social conditions, the poorest obviously are the more affected. So what we see in Brazil is a scenario leading to chaos, and that's being managed by a goofball and a team totally insensitive to social issues and human rights. It's not clearly enough until now how much the president will benefit from this situation and to what extent people understand that they can lose liberties. In this scenario, we observe an exponential growth in the number of lawsuits and criminal investigations targeting free speech. These lawsuits and investigations are used to intimidate journalists, media outlets, citizens in general, in a phenomenon that also involves the manipulation of the judiciary. Digital media vehicles, especially those dedicated to local journalism, are constantly threatened by politicians, authorities, and institutions holding economic and political power. And litigations related to freedom of expression, which used to concentrate in large cities, currently is spread across the country, often in locations where there are no specialized lawyers. As an example, I once had to defend a journalist in a town that could only be reached by boat in the middle of Amazonia. So it's very hard sometimes for us to deal with all those problems. So, and this intimidation technique we have called in Brazil as judicial harassment. And it's similar in some ways to slaps. I think you have already known that slaps, they are the strategic lawsuits against public participation. So this persecution can be characterized as a misuse of the right to petition. And under the guise of exercising a right, the plaintiff, using a prerogative that's legally guaranteed, goes beyond its regular exercise and abuses it to harm and inhibit and silence others. Judicial harassment, as we've been calling it, occurs when a person or cause becomes the target of many lawsuits that are systematically brought against such person or cause. And not only systematically, but also in a very short period of time. So in 1 or 2 months, the person have against him, I don't know, a lot of lawsuits. It's very difficult. Last year, in 2020, a writer was sued by more than 140 bishops from an evangelical church for disagreeing with them. And also 95 people sued an economist who criticized on TV for promoting the purchase of munition. And all those people were members of a pro-gun organization, and they decided all together to sue this economist. So the economists have now 95 lawsuits, and it's very, very hard and very expensive to defend. So that's the way that they find to silence and censorship journalists or people who are on TV explaining things. So another important worrying issue is that in Brazil we don't have a clearly outlined case law criteria on what may and may not be said in the public debate. So judicial decisions on the free speech issues are erratic, contributing to widespread uncertainty, and that's how we are living now. And so the techniques of intimidation and censorship do not end there. And the blocking of social media accounts, such as Twitter, that falls in this context. And that's what Media Defense supported Abraji. That's where Media Defense supported Abraji to filing a lawsuit against the president, because he blocked a lot of journalists from his Twitter account. United States, we also had the same problem with the United States, I think last year too. And now I know about Poland and how it's going on other countries. But Abraji, which is an important institution that brings together investigative journalists in Brazil, listed that 65 blockings made by were 65 blockings made by Bolsonaro since 2018. So in his Twitter account, and among these 65, 13 occurred only this year. So which reveals the flagrant intention to coerce these professionals. And this is very relevant for us because, as Conrad told us, and Twitter is more or less the main digital platform through which journalists obtain and disseminate information. It was also one of Bolsonaro's main channels of communication. That's why his Twitter page is an important channel of dialogue with society, as it makes various actions of the government known, such as infrastructure initiatives, administrative actions, monitoring of the COVID-19, and even the appointment of the Minister of Health is made by his Twitter account, by Bolsonaro's Twitter account. And it's evident that considering the frequency with which Bolsonaro makes use of Twitter to inform about government acts, his official account is of public interest. That's the way that we see it, and should be widely accessible to members of the press and the public without any restrictions. This is the reason why Abraji decided to file a writ of mandamus on July this year against Bolsonaro to stop him from blocking journalists, as I said. Considering that the president's Twitter account is the main channel for publicizing administrative acts, and that furthermore, the public administration has the constitutional duty to grant the public full access to information, the act of preventing journalists from accessing his social network is blatantly illegal for us, for Brazilians. The present blockings specifically target journalists and media professionals, and is a very serious problem for us. And it's a very serious attack on the freedom of the press constitutionally, which is constitutionally protected in Brazil. So filing the mandamus of writ is the writ of mandamus, sorry, is the only alternative to reinstate access to information publicized by the president. In Brazil, the judiciary is sometimes the only way that we have to address some issues, and that's why it's so overloaded in Brazil. So that's more or less what I would tell you about our action now in Brazil. That's it, Carlos. Thank you.
That's great, Taís. Thank you very much. And thank you very much. I would probably highlight from your presentation the special context of intimidation and harassment of the press in general, and journalists in particular by Bolsonaro and his supporters, and how the blocking of someone from his account signals points that person to his supporters
Yes.
as undesirable or unwelcome, and that can lead to further harassment, right? So that is quite relevant, and you know, I'm familiar with what you say about the courts being overwhelmed and everything ending up in court in Brazil, and how difficult it is for the judiciary to you know, get hold of these cases and decide in a timely manner. The element I see a similarity with Poland in the discrimination against the point of view, or you know, blocking journalists because of their opinion or because of critical questioning sometimes, or sometimes we don't even know, he just blocks because these some journalists are identified as opposition to the president. So it's fantastic, and thank you very much for your presentation. We're running out of time, as it always happens in these sorts of activities. It's just every time is the same. We've received quite a few questions, and I'll probably summarize one or two, and then we'll try and answer them individually after the seminar, in writing if we can, so that the participants can have a dialogue about their concerns. So the first question here is, how confident are you, when you're litigating these very high-profile and strategic cases in your countries? How confident are you that they are going to lead to change, to meaningful change, perhaps not only in the individual case? I believe in the three strategies will be successful in each and every case, but more broadly, how can these cases lead to change? Would it be by inspiring new lawsuits, or maybe by forcing Congress or the legislative power to enact legislation, or how do you see that playing out? Maybe that was too open. So Konrad, do you want to go first if you have anything to say?
Sure, yes, that's a very good question. As we see this case as a strategic litigation, and what we are hoping is exactly to reach some broader change. In Poland, we don't have a presidential case law in a strict sense. So the cases are more of inspiration, and this is something we actually hope for. As we see that this problem sort of receives a lot of attention, and we actually receive a lot of questions about the case from also other, especially on the local level, of our local journalists or local activists were blocked by public officials in towns. So we hope that receiving a good case, a good judgment will lead to inspiration for other cases. I wouldn't hope so much for the legislative response now, but this is also related to the kind of government we're having now, and I would be actually a little bit worried that if the current majority would start to go into this direction, we might actually receive something that would be even with a good name, but eventually would lead to suppression of freedom of expression. So this is also why we are choosing now a judicial venue. Yeah, so and this also happened to a couple of other cases who've been litigating that, even though the system has not a precedence in a strict sense, presidential case law in a strict sense, reaching a good judgment might really change the case law.
That's great. Thank you very much, Konrad. I don't know if Taís or Mojirayo want to comment very briefly.
Yes, I've also, sorry, Mojirayo, do you want to speak before me? No, may I go on? Okay. I am particularly very confident that we'll win this cause, but that's a problem. We have already discussed that, Carlos, but because it's going to be effective, this writ of mandamus that we filed against Bolsonaro, it's going to be effective only for journalists associated with Abraji. So it's not going to be effective for all journalists in Brazil, or all communicators or bloggers. It's not going to be that. So in Brazil, NGOs don't have legal standing to bring constitutional remedies for all citizens. So we have to, the effort now for us is to create a precedent, may I say, a jurisprudence, something like that. So others can go on and do the same thing and try also not to be banned from his, from Bolsonaro's Twitter account. That's it, more or less.
Great, thank you. All right, another question. I mean, I've got a few, but let's just go for one more. Do you see that someone asks if, says that funding for...
Okay, for me.
Oh, you,
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I think your screen was freezing.
As I was saying, I said, for me, I believe that to be, yes, I can. Can you? I think I'm having a little bit of network issues there. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go ahead. I said, for me, I think going to ECOWAS court was a good call because the court has shown over the years to exercise good judgment in its decisions. And so, but I must say that I was a bit taken aback with the Togo judgment because the court had not come out to categorically state that every citizen of Togo, for instance, has a right to the internet, and this is not a right that can be tampered with, as in being forceful and being clear about it. So I know that the court can have those situations but it will give us hope. Now, on legislation on the effects of these judgments, I have been instrumental, for instance, to the judgment against the Gambia. I've been in court severally. I've been in court, counsel for the amicus curiae in the Faj versus Gambia case. I kept going to the ECOWAS court. The ECOWAS court kept giving its judgment. And it felt as if the Yahya Jammeh administration was going to go on forever and there will not be an end to Yahya Jammeh. But I am glad and I'm smiling today because there is an end to Yahya Jammeh. And the Gambia has drastically, as in moved from what Yahya Jammeh had done to that country. And so this single success story that I have in my head is the to file a case, knowing fully well that there is hope at the end of the tunnel.
That's a very positive note, Mojirayo. Thank you very much. And I think we've really run out of time now. I was just going to answer a question myself. Someone asks if funding for freedom of information litigation is a big challenge and whether a media defense can help with that. And I'd say yes. Obviously, it depends on the case, but media defense is always ready and willing to support litigation of freedom of expression cases that involves journalists, understood in a very broad sense. If you need support, please check our website and send your application, and we'll analyze it and get back to you as soon as possible. And I think with that 3:05, we have to end here. There's a few more questions. We'll try and answer them in writing. And thank you very much again to our great, fantastic, courageous panelists, Mojirayo, Conrad, and Taís for being here with us. And thank you everyone who signed up and was watching the webinar today. And thanks, Jeanette, for organizing this session as well. Have a good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Very much. Bye.